You became a Catholic last year, right?
Yeah,
At least
yeah,
born into
yeah.
the church. You're 16 when you're telling Sir Roger that you're now a conservative.
Yeah, yeah.
What did that mean to you? What does it mean for you to have this sort of political transformation, as it were, from
Yeah.
maybe you identified as a liberal to a conservative?
Yeah, well, I mean, so I think, oftentimes people kind of complain like conservatives don't have a plan. They don't have a strict set of principles or like a general grand narrative, right? So usually like with the political left, you'll have a narrative about a kind of grievance where you have this power struggle. The upper class, the oppressor has, structurally, systematically disenfranchised a certain group of people, right? Whereas with the right, it kind of takes for granted the history and traditions that are there, so to speak. And so I started realizing that conservatism should be better understood as just this general attitude where I think Sir Roger put it best in his book, How to Be a Conservative. Beautiful things are easily destroyed, but not easily created, right? And at the core of the conservative vision of reality is a kind of what's called a tragic vision. So Thomas Sowell is a famous kind of articulator of this in his book, A Conflict of Visions. And basically with the tragic vision, there's this idea that no matter what you do, there's just inbuilt human limitations. You have to make the best of sometimes the worst options, right? And now, I know it sounds pretty dark, but I appreciate
realistic, yeah.
the tough realism of it, right? Because I had to go through that kind of tough realism in my own life. I couldn't just believe what I thought was emotionally convenient. And precisely because I loved the people that I was talking to, the people that I wanted to help, especially the poor and those who have been systematically discriminated against, I wanted to think about what is really actually going to help them. So I wanted to look at the research papers. I wanted to study. I remember I talked to one friend of mine who just said, yeah, I don't believe in economics.
What does that mean?
So he denied scarcity, he denied opportunity cost, he denied that economics was a thing, and so he believed that you could just reconstruct society however you want it to be. And I'm like, but there are natural inbuilt limitations, right? Like human beings don't have this infinitely malleable human nature. Like we struggle with sin. We struggle with darkness, but we have this great capacity for good. But that capacity for good has to be instantiated through virtue and habituation towards virtue, right? So very Aristotelian thought. But yeah, for me, conservatism, I think at the core of it is one, it's this recognition of human limitation, but it's also this recognition that there is a moral law and that there is something transcendent to which society ought to be oriented towards, right? And so conservatives are perfectionists. By that, it means that the government shouldn't be morally neutral on controversial matters, contra the classical liberal tradition. The government should have a conception of public morality, enforce those morals, and ensure that the populace, to the greatest extent possible, follows through on that moral vision. And so because I was a natural law theorist, a Thomist, I knew what that moral vision was.
For those who are listening right now who think that conservatism is synonymous with the Republican Party, what do you say to them?
No, it's not. Like, the Republican Party, I'd say, oftentimes what passes as like a conservative in America is just libertarianism.
Yeah, it seems that way.
Yeah. But in reality, conservatism is a much richer view of the world. And, I started reading the works of Edmund Burke during this time. And, Roger is considered the spiritual inheritor of Edmund Burke. And Burke talked about how society is a covenant between the dead, the living, and the unborn, right? So, society is not all about just who we are now. It's about those who came before us, who, in a sense, sacrificed and gave up their lives and made certain sacrifices and changes so that we could be alive, so that we could have a society. And that at the same time, we hope to pass on our legacy to those who are yet to come. And so I would say that the conservative view of a society is inherently not suicidal. Whereas a lot of views of society, like, for instance, Thomas Paine, who was it Yuval Levin considers him kind of like the paradigmatic thinker of the contemporary left today. He believed that every society had the right to recreate itself on the pretense of reason. And no traditions, no superstitions, right? So do away with that kind of stuff. It's about you here and now recreating society in your image. And that kind of view of the world leads to resentment. It leads to anger. It leads to hatred. It leads to bitterness of the past. It leads to a total disregard of those who are yet to come.
I just had a thought
Yeah.
that was really fascinating, because I remember when I was a kid and the internet didn't really exist right now, and then when it started to come in, I remember thinking about people who were pornography performers, and obviously a lot of my work has revolved around this, and I thought, gosh, one of the arguments would be like, you don't want to be a grandma one day and like have people know this.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that it seemed to me, from my perspective, that people just don't care about what things will be like for them when they're older.
Yeah.
So to your point about all that matters is right here, right now, you do get the sense that a lot of us just to hell with like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, how people will view me in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of young people today, especially, this idea of thinking 10 years ahead gives them a lot of anxiety, right? A lot of pain. And so what people believe now is because they don't believe there's a transcendent or higher reality to look to, they just have to make the best of what they have now. And so, for instance, this kind of laissez-faire view on human sexuality and social ethics or public morality, it comes down to this belief that, well, let me just be happy. I mean, I'm not happy now, but let me find something that'll make me happy. Maybe it's pornography. Maybe it's, getting wasted with my friends. Maybe it's, making fun of the religious people and making myself feel better for whatever insecurities I have,
Or deciding I'm a different sex and having reassignment surgery.
That sort of thing, let me redefine myself totally. Because when you start telling people, no, there is a natural law, or no, there is a real human nature.
There's a way things work.
Exactly. Then they think, oh, you're imposing this on me, right? Because they view a lot of this kind of talk about objective morality as just a power game. Where, for instance, you and I, right, as men, are imposing our morality on the bodies of women, and hence, we are anti-women because we're pro-life, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's kind of like a football game where all the footballers start deciding that the rules don't apply and that they can make up. Imagine the chaos that would ensue. Everyone's got a different idea of how things ought to work, and there's no overarching narrative, and so it just leads to despair, leads to frustration, a deep frustration.
If you like that clip, be sure to like and subscribe. Cheers.